Hello, everybody. How y'all
Hi.
doing? Good? Everybody awake this morning? Yes, us too. Except for I think I'm still full from turkey. I am so excited to be back to share with you today, and I'm very excited to welcome my husband Brent onto the stage because the first service was the first time he's ever been up here with me to do this together. So would you all give him a round of applause? It's super, super exciting. So I get to travel around the country speaking to a lot of different audiences, but there is something really powerful happening right here in State College. And State College as a town and Penn State as a university really mean a lot to me. I was here last year talking about how I grew up in California, and I came to Penn State on a softball scholarship, so traveled all the way over here. I'd never been to the middle of Pennsylvania before and had sort of one experience. Brent's experience at school was very different, but so just to quickly recap, I came from California, was here in 1999, graduated in 2003 with majors in journalism and Spanish, and I was sort of on the athletics track. And then would you just give everybody sort of an overview of why State College is so important to you and how you're connected to Penn State?
Sure. So I came from California as well. My father and my stepmother live here in State College, and so when I came, I was here and took classes both in the fall and then in the summer as well. So I was here year-round. So I feel I was more of a, even though I was coming from California, I'm still a townie.
So we are obviously a Penn State family. We're connected to this community in a lot of different ways. And Randy, if you could show the first slide, this is just us and all of our Penn State-ness that we bring all over the country no matter where we go. So that's our daughter, Rooney. She's 4. She's almost 5 now. And her favorite friend is the Nittany Lion, for sure. She loves him more than Santa Claus, I think.
Definitely.
And, yep. And, you know, Penn State and State College are really important to us. And yesterday, I can't even believe I just sort of forgot when our anniversary was. We've been married for 8 years, and our anniversary was yesterday. And why that's cool is because, you know, we're not only connected by the university and both studying and going to school here, we also got engaged here, which I do have a picture of because, and why it's awesome is that the Nittany Lion helped us with our engagement. And it's many years later now, which like at the time we weren't allowed to tell anybody that the Nittany Lion helped with the engagement, but would you tell the story of our engagement? Because it's so awesome.
So I called in a major favor from my stepmother, who is here this morning, that I am still trying to work off to this day. I don't know if I'll ever repay that, but yes, we came up with a very elaborate plan that involved multiple people, and so we were at my mother's house in Maryland. We had about a 2.5-hour drive into State College for the plan to start taking effect. So as I am walking out the door of my mother's house, my mom, for reasons that I don't understand to this day, goes, "Wow, you are pretty cool and calm for what's about to happen and everything." And at that moment, I completely lost it, where before I was feeling quite great and confident. So the entire drive up from Maryland to Pennsylvania, I'm screaming and I'm making noises and literally losing my mind because I am just riddled with anxiety as I'm thinking about all these people that need to do specific things in order for this to happen perfectly.
And just a little context for you. So I have the flu, and I'm in the passenger seat next to him as he's screaming all of these and making these noises and being so excited. I've got a fever. I'm not looking my best. It was just like a sweaty mess of fluiness. So I'm excited to go to State College, but just, not on the same planet as him. And prior to this, recently before this, we had a really heart-to-heart, heartfelt conversation about how we didn't need to get married right away, and we should just kind of wait and let's see what God's doing and all of that, which he totally lied about.
Totally.
So
I wanted
continue.
to completely
Continue.
throw her off.
You're not supposed to lie. I just want to say that.
I think
lying's not good.
The timeline I gave was a couple years was when we should get engaged.
We're in no hurry.
Knowing a month later I was going to propose. But the ride up as well, my sister, who is 8 months pregnant, in the back seat, I'm freaking out and looking in the rearview mirror, and she is just mouthing to me, shut up, the entire time. So we get there and we're sitting around and we're watching a movie, and like Erin said, she was feeling awful, so she's like laying down, and I am trying to keep her awake because I know that the Nittany Lion is going to be coming to our door, and I need her awake to be conscious during what I'm about to do. So the plan was for me to basically, the cheerleading coach would head over, text me. I would give my dad the nod for him to walk outside. He was going to take the dogs, put them in the garage, take the wedding ring, give it to the Nittany Lion, and then rush back upstairs to take pictures, the picture being that picture right there. So that was his job. So we're sitting around. I get the text. I give my dad the nod. He smiles and just nods at me like this. And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, yeah. And so he proceeds to go ahead and do that. So while he is walking out to give the Nittany Lion the wedding ring, he accidentally locks himself out. So he runs back in, runs around the house, and he's 6'4", and he is like hurdling bushes and jumping, and I'm catching this out of the corner of my eye thinking, you are gonna ruin this. So he races in, goes, oh my gosh, I forgot my keys, and then races upstairs. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, everything is going on. So as that happens, the doorbell rings, and I have to basically convince Erin to get up and go answer the door.
So the doorbell rings, and he grabs his phone, and he starts fiddling with his phone, and he goes, hey, could you get that door? I have to answer a really important work email.
Another lie.
And I was like, I shot him one of those wifely, well, I wasn't your wife yet, but like one of those girl-friendly glares, like, I'm sick on the couch, I'm sweaty, I'm under a blanket, like, why am I getting up to go get the door, you weirdo? But sure, I'll go get the door. So I go to the front door, I open that door, and the Nittany Lion, you guys, is standing at the door. Like it's a miracle, it's a Christmas miracle, right? So I'm looking at him, and we have this really awkward moment because the Nittany Lion, I don't know if you know this, he doesn't speak, and it's a person inside the like it's a college student inside. You can see his face through the hole in the mouth. So I'm looking at the whole lion, but I'm looking at the kid going, what does this mean? And he's like rubbing his ears, and he's jumping up and down, and we have this awkward moment of like, why are you here? And I just couldn't think of what to do, so I went to hug him because I was excited. And I tripped off the stoop, and my head shot through the hole of the Nittany Lion's mouth hole, and I headbutted that kid, like real hard, and then I kind of shoved off and went, oh, now it's so embarrassing. I'm not sure what to do. And then we just kind of stay. I'm sorry. And again, he's not talking, so it was just beyond awkward. And he allowed it to be. So
well, I let some awkward silence happen, and she's like, I love you, but I don't know why you're here.
So embarrassed.
So I then basically, I had a plan in my head, a well-rehearsed poem or something I had that I wanted to say, and I basically just vomited out, Erin, I love you, will you marry me? And that's actually clearer than what actually came out at the time. And that's how the picture happened. That's how we got engaged.
Well, it was perfect. It doesn't sound perfect when you recount it for a group of people, but it was perfect. And I think what I think about often, and even when I get to look at that picture, is just the joy that we felt on that day, because it was so exciting, not just that the lion was there, but because of what was happening. And our relationship, from dating into early marriage was really joyful, but it was also fraught with a lot of challenge and struggle and personal trial, because and if you remember from my testimony last time, we dated through and got married through my second, third, and fourth cancer diagnoses. So we're dating at the same time that I'm having surgery, going to doctor's appointments, having treatment, doing quarantine for radiation. And here's this amazing person who wanted to be with me through all of that. And if you remember from last time, I kind of gave him the Heisman for a long time, just because I thought, well, this couldn't work out, and I couldn't see a future, let alone a future with somebody else. But I think, and when I tell this story, when we tell this story to people, I am reminded that the way that God pursues us is so reflected in the way that you pursued me at that time, because your pursuit of me was just relentless. I mean, I always say it was like comfortable stalking, but he just pursued me in a way that didn't make a lot of earthly sense. He knew that there was a future. He knew that there was hope. And even though I didn't, our early time, while it was really challenging, it was so joyful and happy. But we did struggle. And I think one thing I wanted to ask you, in that early time, because I really feel like God was preparing us through challenges and through trials for entrepreneurship and for ministry, and to be partnered in ministry, not just a partnership of marriage, but to actually be doing work that's making God's kingdom relevant in the here and now. And we're trying to create a legacy for people to walk in their faith and to do the work that God is calling them to. So this is a long-winded way to get to this question, which, we went through a lot of trials and struggles, but how do you feel like God prepared us in that season to do the work of not only marriage, but ministry?
Well, I think it was very challenging, and from the get-go, it was, okay, you're sick. How do we deal with this? How do we, move forward with this being basically the constant? But I think it's really neat to see what kind of happened with just resiliency and with just being strong and building trust in God, and really, I just think we got very serious very quickly because we were united in this problem of that, that with you being sick. And it was really interesting to see just the trust that was established and the foundation that, we would use and continue to obviously use through this day.
Yeah, I think, and just to give you a little insight, I mean, we dated, got married in November 2010, and then, we didn't even take a honeymoon. We instead flew to exotic Rochester, Minnesota, so I could have surgery at the Mayo Clinic.
It was very romantic.
Right after we got married, so God had us in. Did you see it was very romantic? It was so romantic. We were there with my mom, too, which was
even
amazing.
more romantic.
But I feel like, having to sacrifice and walk a path, even in the early season of our marriage that wasn't traditional. We didn't do, things in the order. We took a honeymoon trip 3 years later. I think what I noticed about you is something that's indicative to all men, because when you're faced with a challenge, whether you're single or whether you're in marriage, a lot of the time, we as women, we just want to, we want to talk about the problem, we want to explore the problem, and the men want to fix the problems. They want to come alongside us and be able to lead well and to be there to comfort and to be there to support, but they want to fix the problem a lot of the time. And I know God was showing you something that he wanted you to know in your own faith journey, but also to be able to come alongside me and partner with me well was not necessarily that you can fix the problem, but I know there's a takeaway for everybody that I want you to share.
Well, as men, we're problem solvers. That's what we do. We pride ourselves on solving problems. I love being a creative problem solver. I think it's hysterical when, a bunch of guys, you start working on a lawnmower in the front yard, and before you know it, all the guy neighbors are over trying to solve this problem. So the issue with this was, how do I solve a problem that I can't fix? And that was very challenging. As a husband, I can make her life more comfortable. I can do things to distract her. I can do things to help her, but I can't physically, personally solve eradicating cancer from her body. And so I think the biggest thing God was doing, the work in me during that time, was really trusting him. And so I think as we walk through this, I had nothing but my only choice was to completely lean and push into God. And I think just going back to the same thing, the foundation that was built, that trust when I had nothing else but to trust in him, to see God come through in a miraculous way and really help me deal with something that I could not personally solve myself, was just absolutely beautiful.
I think, and too, what's amazing, and a lot of times we talk about, even as a body of believers, we talk about hindsight being such a blessing, right? Where you can look back at the seasons of your life that were struggles, that were trials, and you can see God's hand in everything. And when you get to the future and you look back at the past, you go, I see what God's doing. Like, he was clearly there every step of the way. But the challenge to us is to purpose in our own spirit, and to make sure that we're operating from a posture of trust when we're in the present of our situation, because we're not always going to be able to get to the future to be able to look back at the past. It's really a skill, I think, that we've been fortunate to develop, in that when you're in a trial, when you're struggling through a challenge, to understand even then that God is with you. And just because you cannot control the situation doesn't mean he doesn't have the situation well in hand. So that's the first takeaway for our time together today, that you can trust God even when you can't fix the situation.
Absolutely.
So I think what's been cool about not just being married for 8 years, but as you know, as we look back and we have hindsight around what God was doing in our relationship, one thing that I really appreciate about our time together, not just being married together, but in ministry together, is that the love between us has grown, and the way that I get to observe my husband operating in all of his giftings and talents. Like, so often, you don't see married couples working on a business together. They're married, but maybe one of them goes outside the home to work, or maybe mom or dad is staying home, or someone's working from home. And the dynamic of the professional relationship really is very different, and it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But what I've really appreciated watching about you is that the things that I'm not good at, or the ways that God has gifted and given talents and resources to me, so closely complement what he's good at. And I get to watch him live that out. I get to watch him be a dynamic, business leader and husband, and all of those things are kind of interconnected together. But I think what it's created in me is a boldness to take risks. And I didn't always feel that way, and I know some of the ladies out there would agree that we don't necessarily like taking risks because they don't feel safe, we don't feel secure. But what I've really enjoyed about working with you is that we are partnered in marriage together and in ministry, and that allows us, it refreshes us in a way that we can take risks for God. And not just in our marriage, but in our professional work. So would you talk about, yes, we've been called to marriage together, we've been called to ministry together, and starting and growing a company from nothing together was a very challenging thing to do, and we did not have everything figured out. Even now, we don't have it figured out, but we've watched God move. Would you just share a story or talk a little bit about, what it was like to start and grow the company, and, your earthly timeline versus what God has planned?
Sure. So I think for me, it was an easier transition to go to switch into an entrepreneurial role, I'm just entrepreneurial by nature. So I think
I am not.
It was a lot more interesting of a transition for Erin. But it's really neat to be able to work together, and we just wear so many different hats, from being best friends to husband and wife to mom and dad and, business partners. And it's funny because, we both have our avenues and our channels, and in some channels she's my boss, and in other channels I'm her boss, and it's really neat that we're able to really, there's no separation between what we're doing. This is work-life balance. Everything.
Everybody talks about work-life balance. We're like, what's that?
everything is the same, and so, but it's beautiful to be able to walk through this together. But I think that as far as like timelines, and we all have our expectations, and we all want these different things. And I think even for me, the struggle that I have is I am very go. I want to. I'm always speeding and racing to get to the next place, and it's hard for me to not. I want to live where we are in a year, and when we're there, I want to be 5 years from now. And so, I think that the neat thing that God really was working on me through this entire process, and still does through this refining process, is getting on page with His timeline. And the funny thing about it is, my goals, my dreams, these different things, my timelines pale in comparison to God's dreams and God's timeline. So why am I even planning? I think it's been neat to switching my mindset to letting go of expectations, letting go of what I view as success, what I view as whatever that is, and really getting on board and operating within God's will.
I think too, God has had us on a trajectory of slow surrender, if that makes sense. We all talk about all the time how we're supposed to fully surrender, and like you need to lay everything down at God's feet, and we need to do that. But I think God's so filled with grace to guide us along and grow us through the process that we've experienced periods of surrender. Here in our parenting, we need to surrender something. Maybe it's an approach to parenting that we have that we need to lay down, or we need to surrender her actual faith to the Lord and just trust that He's going to guide her in His own way. We've surrendered to quit a job so He could set up the business. And this is how the Lord is in it and that it's His timeline. Is we lived for a year off of one teacher's salary in San Diego, California, in like coastal San Diego. And there's no explanation for that other than God is sovereign, and He has everything orchestrated and situated to provide for every single need that you have. But we've gone through a process of slow surrender and many phases of surrender in different areas. But there was a big one for us that really gave us the shove forward that God needed to take the business to the next level, to help us partner in ministry in bigger ways and more ways that we're going to impact not just our community, but the world. But would you share the big one? Because I think, quitting your job and still having the safety net of my salary, we were inching along, and I was really struggling with like the security of financial, like we need this money coming in. How are we going to eat and so we started talking about me quitting my job and what that would mean if we had zero income as we're trying to grow the business. And all the ladies out, like, I'm sweating even talking about it, because it's so counterintuitive when you're talking about being a strong, independent, financially sound, everything's taken care of and all of your earthly ducks are in a row. And God really showed up in a period where he was requiring us to surrender. So would you tell that story?
Sure. So I think I was having conversations about you quitting your job. I don't know if we
Oh,
were
yeah, I
having
definitely
conversations.
Talking to yourself.
We went to, I think the kind of catalyst for this, the neat opportunity that we had was we went to the Azusa Now event a couple years ago, and we were selling books at the time. We had one book out. We were there from 5 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night.
And so, sorry, just really quickly. So the Azusa Now Prayer Revival is like 100,000 people. It's at the LA Coliseum, and this is how you know it's God again. Like, we were the only non-food vendor at this event.
Placed
our
next
little
to
book
the
series,
food.
we had one book, and where it's pouring rain, and we're under this little tarp, and we're there for 18 hours. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, thank you for the context. And
Yeah.
we were a vendor placed next to the food, so it's great because as everyone's eating, they're like staring at our booth. So we are there from 5 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night. We are just slinging books, and just people are coming up, and we are, no one knows who we are, and we're talking about how we're going to be this huge brand, and we want to do all these different things, and we have this list of all of our books, yet we only had one at the time. They're like, where are the other books? I'm like, they're coming, I promise. So we are selling books just left and right, and no one knew who we were, so every person that we talked to, we had to basically give a commercial for our company. At best, it was about a minute or two. At worst, it was like 25 minutes. And so we literally did this all day long. It was exhausting and amazing at the same time. And so, but this gentleman came up to me and just, was like, hey, like, I love what you're doing. Like, God put in my heart that this next generation is going to be reached through books. I would love to pray for the author. And I was like, it's my wife. She's right there. Do your thing. And he went over and prayed for her and then left, and I was on to the next person. And then a couple hours later, he came back, and we kind of had a break during that time. And we just chatted for about 15 minutes. Great guy. And I just was like, look, he said, God put on my heart to come back and talk to you about what you're doing. And I said, we're a ministry, we're a business. I'm trying to keep this business afloat in the same breath as I'm trying to keep my family alive and pay rent. And, he prayed for me. I gave him my business card, and he left. And so, basically about 2 weeks later, we're sitting in the backyard. We called a business meeting. We had our neighbor watch our 1-year-old daughter at the time. And I just said, like, hey, like, I really feel like God's calling us for you to quit your job. And which didn't go over well. But
yeah, I thought, I'm not sure that that's happening. That seems insane. And I think the two things I was struggling with were when I got sick, I felt a stirring in my soul to be a teacher, to be in the classroom, to make sure I was spending every day, pouring into kids and leaving a legacy for them if I wasn't going to be here that long. So I felt like if God was going to call me out of that, I needed like a big old sign. I needed the clouds to part and the dove. Like, if God could send the dove to like make sure I knew it was what he was saying to do, I could do it, but I needed a big sign. So in my head, it was that. I was like, I can't let go of teaching without a sign. And then the second thing was just the financial component. Like, God, what does this mean? How does this make earthly sense? If I quit my job, like, how are we going to live? And all of these things were like swirling in my, mom, wife brain going, I can't see, the path that you want to take us on. But if you want me to do it, I will do it. And he goes, in that way that husbands do, he goes, well, I know you should really pray about that. And I went, cool, I'm going to pray about it, and you're going to sit here while I do it. So we prayed in the backyard, and I just said, Lord, if this is what you're calling us to, he said it. If this is what you want me to do, I'll be obedient. I need a sign. I need a full-on big sign so that I understand it's from you. And I do not want to put my security, my safety, my trust in my bank account. Because that's not what you say to do. You say to trust me, and you say you'll provide for every need. And this, if you are who you say you are, and I can believe it, then I can make this decision, but I need a sign, right? So 2 hours later, go ahead, you can tell us.
So we're sitting around the dinner table, and I get up to go check the mail because that's what I do, and I'm raging ADHD, and I can't sit down for longer than 25 minutes. This is actually the longest I've ever sat down, ever in the history of my life. And so there's a letter in the mailbox, and it's from that guy.
First of all, you came back, you went, checked the mail, and you came back, and he's holding a letter, and he's sobbing. Sorry, go ahead.
And so it's a letter from the guy that we had met at the conference 2 weeks earlier, and it basically said, Brent and Erin, what you guys are doing is incredible. Keep focusing on God, and He'll take care of the rest. Here's a check for $10,000. Don't worry about rent for the next couple of months.
And I went, okay, Lord. I have to quit my job. So it was a Saturday, and it was May, and I went in Monday, and not knowing what would happen, I told my principal. It was perfect timing, because I was like, I'll finish out the school year, but I told them I wasn't coming back. And what's cool about that story is that God knew what we needed, obviously, and His plans are perfect, and He's sovereign, and He can see everything moments, years, a millennia before it's going to happen, and that answered prayer, that big sign that I needed, was in the mailbox as that prayer was coming out of my mouth. Like God had already delivered on that promise to take care of us. And it's just cool. And I think the second takeaway we want for this time for you guys, and as thinking about what God's stirring your heart for, and not just being a part of this church, but separately as a child of His, like He's got work for each and every one of us to do. But we can trust Him even when we can't see the timeline. We don't know the timeline. We don't, it's not up to us to put our little, all of our chess pieces on the board and to move our life into position the way we see fit. God has created, He has predestined and crafted a path for each of us to walk. And it's not about, looking out and surveying the entire world and going, what kind of a life do I want to create for myself? And then inviting the Lord along on that life. That's going to fall short of the plans that He has. So if the encouragement for this takeaway is simply like, God knows the path, He knows the timing, He knows every detail, and it's more about going on a hunt for the things that God has for you. The path that is already carved out, it's already laid out. It's about shoving the snow out of the way, and uncovering it and coming to find it and being able to find it with Him. And you talked about asking for wisdom before. God freely gives us wisdom. A lot of time, we have an idea or we feel like God's stirring our heart for something, and we don't even take the next step, which is just to simply ask Him, well, Lord, what does this mean? You're tweaking my heart for something. I had an idea. I noticed something out in the community, and you want me to act on it. God, what do you want me to do? And how He can show up simply when we ask. I mean, like I said, like that answered prayer was waiting. All I had to do was say the words, God, I'll be obedient. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, and taking just that step of obedience and the leap of faith and not waiting until you're ready. Because if you wait till you're ready, it's never going to happen. And so I really just, the Martin Luther King quote of just taking that next step even when you can't see the staircase. I think about that a lot.
Yeah, what I think about often too is, God can do a lot with just our obedience. He doesn't need our expertise. He doesn't need you to be an expert in any one thing. He just needs willing individuals who are open and available and who are in receipt of any downloads He wants to give you. And He just needs your yes, because your yes gives Him the space to move. What I want to kind of segue to now, and I think what's been really cool, in getting to not just live with you every day, because I just love you so much, but I've really gotten to see a lot of different ways that God's using you and is growing you, not only as somebody who pursued me as a single man and then who became my husband. I get to watch you in that role, and then I get to watch you and partner with you in ministry, and now I get to watch you and partner with you in the journey of parenting, which is really awesome. But I feel like God's really had you on a trajectory for your own spiritual walk, because you've struggled in your life. I mean, even before I knew you, you struggled with a lot of demons, a lot of different things that were weighing you down, that were keeping you from the path I believe God wanted you to be on. But I've got two questions around that. So as you've become a dad, I mean, you're the dad to a girl. We run a female-focused company. I mean, we're all about partnering to champion the next generation of girls, to make sure every girl understands her voice matters. Every girl has a strength and identity. She has a faith. She has confidence. She's going to walk in her leadership role. I mean, these are the things we talk about daily, and it's not just because I'm a grown-up girl that I care all about this. I'm partnered with a man who does not have, the struggle that it is to be a girl, because you have a totally different perspective, because you are not a girl. Yet here you are championing this cause right alongside me, and it's not you're coming along as like an accompaniment. Like, everybody thinks too, I travel around, I speak, I'm the one sharing, I'm the voice of the movement, I'm the mom. But the reason this business is successful and the reason God can move so powerfully inside our ministry is because of this guy right here. He adds a level of amazingness to our ministry in ways that I cannot even explain to you. So I just want you to talk a little bit about what it means to you to be the leader of a girl-focused company, because you're also the leader of our tiny human daughter.
Well, I love it, and it's so important, and I think that with anything that in girl and female empowerment, it's mostly led by women, and it's a shame, and we really need to champion that cause together and be unified in that. And it's like, gosh, I don't need to tell you that there's an issue out there. Look outside at the world. Our girls are being bombarded by social media, by pressure, by all these different things that are attacking their identity and worth. And we need, as men, we need to champion our girls and our wives and women in general for this, in a common way, in a unified way.
What do you feel like? So I know that, and in watching how God's worked on you, not in all of these roles that you have, what do you feel like God has shown you in your own journey of being a dad that you feel like could encourage some of the people out there who are parenting, not necessarily girls, but who are just bringing up youth and the next generation of kids? I know God's revealed things and really shown you a lot of we're giving you a lot of wisdom around parenting in general. So if there's anything to share there, and I know we've talked about trusting God not only in our situations when we can't fix things, and trusting him when we can't see his timeline, but I know you have some wisdom around parenting just in general and trusting him.
Yeah, and I think I have kind of two things, but I want to preface it by saying, when my daughter was born, and even for multiple months as she was born, I did not feel qualified to be her father. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. It didn't seem like I had much to do. She's, feeding the baby, and the baby doesn't really need me. I can clean and I can cook and do stuff like that. But
these things are very helpful. Anyone who's having a baby soon.
But I definitely, as far as like my identity and my worth, to be honest with you, I really struggled with this, and I went like, I don't feel qualified to be this child's father. And I had a really good friend of mine, Willie Briscoe, who just said to me, like, Brent, God chose you of anyone in the history of humanity, future and past, to be her father, and he specifically chose you, and you are the most qualified person. And that really shaped and changed the lens where I was like, man, I am the most qualified person to be her father. And it's a responsibility that I take very seriously. And I think the two things, as far as being a father, is so important, and it's so vital to especially for children, but especially for girls. And I think that modeling with our marriage, this is going to be how she views marriage, and she sees our marriage every single day. She sees how I speak to her mom. She sees how we interact. She sees how we communicate. She sees how we rally around a common problem. She sees just how a marriage is, that this is going to be the number one marriage that she sees. And then when she goes then and is looking for a husband, the qualities that she sees in our marriage and in me are going to be the things that she's seeking after in a mate. And that is a very just sobering thing for me. And I think another very sobering thing for me is that she is in a certain way, being human, is going to view God the Father through her earthly father. And I don't want to get in the way, and I don't want any of my flaws or my character defects to shape negatively how she views God the Father. And I think that that's just really shapes my everyday thought of strategically parenting her, giving her grace, being loving, and just really making sure that like all of my conversations, all of my words are God honoring, and filled with grace.
And and at the end of the day, I think, if we're talking about trusting God in all things and being able to surrender and lay down, our own approaches, our own, thoughts about how things should go, right? We're going to parent to the best of our ability, but at the end of the day, we have to surrender her to the Lord, the outcome of her. I mean, we declare her faith in the name of Jesus. We're going to parent her the best way possible, but at the end of the day, like, we have to trust God, even though we can't control her. We can't control our offspring, right? The person she's going to become is dedicated and is unto the Lord. So all we're called to do is our best and to give it to the Lord and trust that he's going to see her through and that he has a plan and a purpose for her life. And when we start to meddle in some of that stuff, we know as parents, like, the tighter our grip gets, the more they try to wriggle out of it. So just trying to model that in a good way, and just, trusting him with everything, and just being in partnership on that, I think is so huge, and hopefully an encouragement to everybody out there. I know we have to wrap up. We have just a minute or two, and I just wanted you to speak a little bit about the opportunity to. I think what's awesome about coming back to State College, not because we both went to Penn State and we love the university, which we do, but this town is really important to us for a lot of reasons. It's not just because my in-laws live here, but because this is a place that God is moving, and God is doing a mighty work in this church, this community, and we're so grateful to be a part of it. We do consider this our home church when we're in town. Even though we're from all the way over in San Diego, it just feels like family here, and I know God has an opportunity to do a lot of powerful things here. So if you would just close us out and talk a little bit about what being here means to you and what you see happening, even just in our family and how this church has blessed us.
Yeah, and I would just say, echoing that this is our home church, which doesn't make sense because we live in San Diego, but my family lives here, and we go to church when we're in town here. And even last time I tried to sneak in January just to go to a service, and Dina saw me and called us out. But my father and my stepmother were in a really bad car accident, and you guys lifted us up in prayer, and it's just beautiful, and it's so awesome to see how diverse the community is, and just how much you guys, it's not just speaking, it's walking the walk, and you guys do so much, and I see all the activities. I'm like, I want to stay here and do all these different things with you, and it's so neat to see this, and we get to see so many different churches, and there's just something really special coming here, and if we lived here, we'd be going to church here, for sure.
There is, and I think, just in closing, it's such an honor to be here and to have the opportunity to come back and share, and not just with updates, but just to encourage each and every one of you. If God is stirring your heart for something, if you have had an idea or an inkling that he wants you to take one step. I talked to an amazing woman, Robin, out during the break, and we talked about how God doesn't necessarily illuminate the entire path. The Bible says he is a lamp to our feet. He lights our feet so that we can see maybe just the one step we need to take. When we say yes, we take one step. We give God space to move and enact the next phase of the plan he's created. So, feel emboldened today to take a risk. When you're walking in God's will and his plan and his purpose, it is the safest place you could be, even though it feels risky maybe by the world's standards. It really is the most comforting, the most secure place you can be. And our journey is a testament to that, because he's taken two broken people who made tons of mistakes, who then just decided, you know what, we're going to take risks. We're going to step out and be bold for God. We're going to say yes to every opportunity. And now we get to watch him get all the glory in it. So that's my challenge to you. If you've got God saying something to you today, just be in receipt of that and ask for the wisdom. Say, Lord, what is the one next step you want me to do with this idea you gave me? And watch him show up. It is going to be so cool. So thank you guys so much for having us. It's so great to be here.